everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast. On this episode, I've got Ryan Douthit of Driving Sports TV, along with our very own Rob Einaudi, and today we're talking about automotive media. We're talking about basically how it started, where it's been, where it's going, and the fact is we've all been there somewhat from the inception, because let's face it, we all learned how to read when we were little kids, and back then you had stone tablets and you had magazines. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to go all the way up through when the internet came to be, because unfortunately we're all old enough to remember a time without the internet, right? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about podcasting, we're going to talk about video and everything in between. So welcome, gentlemen. How y'all doing today?
Fantastic. It is pouring rain, but that's an improvement from the freezing rain that we had last week. So
it's better than the snow.
Yeah, we got dumped on.
Really?
Yeah, so much snow. Has nothing to do with our topic at hand, but
it's 66 degrees out here in California.
All right.
I'm
Next topic.
Yeah.
just saying, it's nice. It's nice. So, all right, let's get into this. Now, the three of us have all been doing automotive media for a long time, right? Ryan, you have done everything from video, podcasting, print to, your whole thing.
And pre-automotive, I did Tech Bug magazine, which was a big tech lifestyle print publication on newspaper here in the Pacific Northwest. We had a biweekly circulation of 80,000 newspapers, and that's actually where I started doing car reviews, was for that. And then eventually I decided I liked the car reviews, but the rest didn't stick around. So
okay. And
from
Rob,
doing that, I'm like, I want to start a print magazine and a car magazine. So I did. I did one issue. It was regional, and I'm like, well, that was a lot of work. I'll just do a national magazine. And then I launched that and ran that for a year. And
that was Subi Sport magazine, correct?
Actually, it was Driving Sports magazine. So the very first, so I went from Tech Bug and Computer Source magazine to Northwest Auto Sports. There was one issue, and then I went from that to Driving Sports magazine, which was in print for a year, and that kind of competed with Car and Driver, Road and Track. But I say it kind of competed only in the fact that it was print, and it was on the newsstand, and it was on paper. I had no idea what the hell I was doing, but I'm kind of that. Let's try that. Let's just try printing a nationally. Yeah. I mean, we were in Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, Borders. We were internationally circulated at all the major newsstands in the UK, Singapore. Yeah, kind of nuts. But
collector items.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to collect a mediocre print publication, but then through a number of circumstances, I ended up actually redoing it as Subi Sport, because I decided that I could not compete with Road and Driver, Car and Track. They had massive budgets, really deep knowledge, stuff that, I just couldn't compete with. So I turned it into Subi Sport, the Subaru magazine, because that was our cover story for the issue that I decided I wanted to change the title. It was a Subaru cover story. So I'm like, that's that. And it was a huge success and ran for several years until the entire industry cratered. But while I was doing that, I was keeping Driving Sports around. So like when I did Subi Sport print publication, Driving Sports continued on as a video supplement. And this is pre-YouTube. Yeah. This was because I actually went to school for video production. That was my main school thing.
So when YouTube came out in what, 2007?
Well, 06 is when Google first acquired it, and the production partner thing kicked off in 07, and we were signed as a production partner. But we came from the Google video side.
Okay, but when we talk about video in and of itself, right, you talk about, let's look at the platforms, right? You had YouTube, you had Vimeo, you had
for automotive,
StreetFire. I'm not forgetting it. StreetFire.net. Right.
Posted to Street Fire.
Yeah, so did I. Right. And so you had these new budding video channels that were out there. And I feel like and we're talking about the days of like 320 and 480p, like the video quality.
There's way more than that too, because there was Mevio. I was assigned Mevio producer. That's actually the first time I got a big check, was signing with them.
What was it called?
Mevio, Mevio.
I don't even remember that.
It was a weird niche channel. Basically, they signed shows. And so if you had a show and entertained them and they thought it was great, they would sign you. And it was actually the best payout of any platform prior to YouTube. Unfortunately, it was such a good payout, they went bankrupt.
Yeah.
It was very .com-y, like not commie, .com-ish.
Yeah.
And where they had big ideas, they were going to be the next big thing. And they ran actually for a couple of years. I do believe Adam Curry was involved with it initially. Remember Adam Curry from MTV era?
Yeah, sure.
And his
one of the
podcast
VJs.
kind of came out of that.
Gotcha.
Or it came before it. I can't remember. It's all a little hazy in that period.
So let's talk about this, right? Because like I said, we all came from kind of the print side. Then we went into the video. We started doing podcasting and whatnot. Rob, you used to be the editor-in-chief of cardomain.com, which at one point was the largest automotive community online. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was big. I mean, it was, I think we had 2 million people signed up technically as members, 3 or 4 million, unique visitors a month. Just
that was like
lot.
05, right?
Yeah.
That was
Early
05, 06, I think.
Yeah. That got launched. Alex Algard created that. He also owns a little site called White Pages. And he kind of created it because he had an e-commerce site for audio. And they're like, well, let's create this thing on the side where people can document their builds on their audio builds. And it just it blew up. Yeah. And it was kind of like MySpace pages or GeoCities pages about your car. So
but for cars, and it was
great.
It was great.
What was great, what I liked about Cardomain was that it was a place on the internet, whereas if you wanted to showcase your vehicle, you could create your own vehicle page, put up as much information as you wanted to, as many pictures as you wanted to, as much video as you wanted to. And then you would have your own link. And so anytime you wanted anybody to see something about your car, you just forwarded them the link to your page.
You just send them that. Be like, yeah, you want to see my car? Here's everything I've ever done to it.
Yep.
And people were very accepting of other people on there too. I mean, there was some, usual troll hater stuff, but in general, people were very supportive of each other. People went there to, learn and get inspired and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was fun.
Some people had really extensive builds, like whole histories and comments. And
absolutely. Yeah, man. I think it was one of the first sites that really lent to community, as opposed to what we would call just like the forums back in the day, right? Where you would go on and you would go into a forum and you would have your forum members, but this was more of a visual thing.
Yes.
Where a forum was more social, this was more visual.
But that was also in a way its downfall, because it required that you knew HTML to actually like format your page properly. Otherwise,
correct.
It had a curve and it never upgraded its back end.
Well, so we did toward the end there, but then it kind of worked against us because, people don't like change either, especially crusty old car people. So like when you move buttons on a website, they get a little cranky, but
they all
it was pretty easy to figure out though. I mean,
so then so we had that, right? We go from print, we jump into forums, and we jump into community sites like Cardomain and whatnot, right?
Video.
Now all of a sudden, video pops up in like 2008, right? And 2009. And like my first experience with video, aside from doing some little shit here and there, was being on television, right? I was on a reality show that Rob was instrumental in getting me on, because he was the editor of Cardomain, and he's a Mopar guy, just like I'm a Mopar guy. And he was like, dude, you've got this really cool car. You should be on this television show. To which I responded, okay.
Yeah, because I got a call from producers and they're like, we want a tuner guy. We want a truck guy. We want a muscle car guy. And all that. I was like, I know where to find all those people.
Yep.
So that was fun.
Rob inadvertently launched my whole career.
I didn't even realize that Rob had a hand in getting you on that show. After all the, I've known you guys for like a decade or more.
Amazing.
No, he totally did. And so, but it was interesting from the video aspect, because we talk about it now. And this was, I remember we filmed the show back it's called Bull Run back in 2006. And back then we spent 32 days on the road, and it was the most expensive reality show at over $11 million.
Yeah, nobody would do that today. Nobody.
It would never happen, dude. It would never happen. But I want, like, when you think of the scope,
because of the liability, is that why it was?
No. It was because of the lack of knowledge of. Remember, you got to remember, like, this is when reality shows were just kind of coming out.
People were figuring it out.
Figuring it out. So we had 12 teams. Each team had 2 minivans that would follow it from racetrack to challenge around the United States. And I remember the digital decks that were in the trunks.
Oh, I know what those look like.
Yeah. The digital decks, and they would wire up all the cars. I remember I almost punched one of the producers in the face because when I first got they shipped our cars places. We jumped we flew out to where the cars were, and there were wires all over my car. And I was like, who in God's name did this?
Who touched my car?
Who touched my car? Right. And like fists broke out, but it was such a mishmash because the producers didn't know what to really do. Each car had 3 or 4 decks in the back of the car that we would stop every 45 minutes to change a card or a deck. And back then, what was it, Ryan? What was a big card back in 2007? A gigabyte?
Well, if you were even filming with cards, they were probably using actually Panasonic P2s. And the P2s for a 256, was it a 256 gigabyte? Anyway, no, it was a megabyte. Anyway, I don't remember sizes because that's too far along. But I will just say a card that would let you film about 30 minutes to an hour of footage cost $500 each.
Yeah,
and they typically ran 2 cards in each thing, and those were the P2 cards were bank, but they were reliable. And at the time, you can't. So in 2004 was the very first time I was on a press launch, and I'm like, I'm going to film this for my channel. Smart. And it was a montage, and I called up.
Douthit's always thinking.
I was like a Randy Chase. So this was for the WRX press launch, and it was weird because they wouldn't tell us anything that was going on. They're like, "We're flying you into LA. Mother will be your contact. Mother will contact you with Mother. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Mother will contact you when
they were all shifty back in the day, man.
So we flew into LA. They're like, Mother says you're going to go to this hotel. There's a room waiting for you. Go to sleep. In the morning, you will have a car. It's like, okay, I have no idea.
So it was like the NSA was doing car reviews.
You can't prep for this. You're like, okay, I don't know. So I called up Chase Cam, and he sent me out a little lipstick camera setup. But that was like a lipstick camera with a cable that would go to
I remember those.
Pack it in. I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. I had no idea what I was doing. But I filmed the whole thing, and it was very educational to try to do that on the road. But you're talking about with Bull Run. This reminds me of a shoot that I think it was in 2004. I was at the Streets of Willow after SEMA. So it was a SEMA show. There was a couple of SEMA cars that we were allowed to drive, and they brought them to the Streets of Willow. And I showed up, and at the time I was one of the bigger YouTube channels. So this must have been 2007, probably 2007, 2008. And I show up, and it's just me with a camera and a GoPro. That's my whole setup. Motor Trend was just getting into video at the time. They didn't know what they were doing. This is 5 generations ago of their whole video production thing. They showed up with a director, a sound man, 2 camera guys. They had a crew of basically 5 or 6 and probably about $100,000 worth of equipment. They posted all they were producing for was YouTube. Their video within a week got, I think it was probably 2,000 views. My video got 20,000 views, which at the time for YouTube, that was big. Yeah. And it's and that has always stuck with me for these type of productions. You're you can go big, but you really have to, going big, you're blowing a lot of money with no real return. So go simple, go basic. And that's kind of what the media that's really taken off on those platforms. When you do this overproduced, shows like Bull Run and all those kind of things, producing something like that for the web is kind of
no, it wouldn't work now.
It wouldn't work. No. It wouldn't work. Can you imagine spending $11 million?
No. Well, when you think about it,
YouTube series.
YouTube shows right now, there are very few that go over that kind of that vaunted 12 to 18 minute thing, right? Yeah. Most shows should probably be 8 to 10 minutes.
Probably,
right?
Yeah.
Because people are, they are watching them on their phones. They're watching them wherever they are on their iPads, whatever.
My last episode was 28 minutes, but
look at the most successful guy on YouTube is Chris Fixit.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, for the car segment.
For car stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he shoots stuff probably with his phone on his.
It's a GoPro mounted to his head, and he just walks around with his hands and does things.
And he's amazing. He's awesome.
But here's the thing: there's some content. I like my favorite. I'm a 12 to 20 minute guy. Like that's my attention span on good automotive content, right?
Yeah.
I think you could have a nice story arc. You could tell a good story in that time. And when you whittle it down, it's basically a half-hour show if it was on network television or if it was on cable, right?
Right.
The small snippets, when we talk about media, now you've got these things that are just on, like TikTok videos. TikTok videos are 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Right? Or, Instagram videos are a minute. And I look at that and I think it's both good and bad, because now it's perfect for anyone on the planet who's ADD, because they're like,
well, we all are now. I mean, honestly, we've been trained. My attention
Ryan,
span
you're not
is
wrong.
Maybe 90 seconds.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe. Like Twitter and Instagram are perfect for me. I'll watch a burnout or a wreck. I'm not there for the whole story.
Yeah.
So I want to rewind just a little bit, because like in the early days around the YouTube, when YouTube was first getting started,
when the Google tablets were there.
Yeah. And Google acquired them in 2006. At the time, there were at least 20 platforms that everybody was trying to get seen
to get in. Sure.
Everything from Blip to posting a video to Street Fire. Blip was good.
Yeah.
They were eventually acquired by Yahoo and then disappeared, like all Yahoo acquisitions. But the point was that you would produce one show and you would put that same show on every platform, and fingers crossed, one of them would be popular. Not like it really mattered. Nobody was really making money.
One of the platforms would work out.
Right. But you were producing the same content. You would produce your one. Everything was 3 to 5 minutes long.
Yep.
That's what you did. And it was typically montage, typically not very deep knowledge. If you got too nerdy, people didn't like that early on. It was like everything had to be a trailer, essentially. And you would put that to all things. But now, like, you look at how things are now, if you produce something for YouTube and you just drop it on TikTok, you're guaranteeing nobody's going to watch that.
Complete
Instagram, it's come to the point now where every platform has such an incredibly unique demographic that you got to produce for everything completely different. I know we started talking about TikTok and Mike's checked out already.
I mean, so here's the thing. I look at TikTok and I think TikTok is a viable platform. I do. There's no question about it.
It's good for certain people.
For certain people, but there is, again, we go back to the whole attention span on TikTok, and I have trouble wrapping my head around it a little bit, because I think that the type of entertainment that's on there is so scattered. It's so all over the map, and it's odd to me. Like when I look at TikTok and then I just see random people just freaking dancing and doing everything for like 30 seconds. It's just jokey stuff.
Quick jokes.
Exactly
it's
right.
Quick jokes. And the thing that the reason I'm on TikTok, I have a TikTok channel.
What do you do on TikTok? I got to see this. What does Ryan do on TikTok?
I think it's no.
I hope it's not that.
You missed that. No. Typically, so I tried to post a picture of a car sliding on gravel, and TikTok took it down because of inappropriate.
Why?
They are incredibly. If you take a production car and you do anything that slightly spins a wheel, they're like, nope, that's not allowed against community guidelines. Why is that? Community guidelines.
What's community guidelines?
I don't know.
Like you can't have fun? Like what's the deal?
No fun. So you can dance, you can do all sorts of things that are like inappropriate if you really want to like bend it.
Like that's what I mean. You see butts and everything all the time on TikTok.
Yeah, but I don't understand. Dude, you spin a wheel. That's
bad news, huh?
Bad news. You're so I have trouble posting things. So what kind of works are quick walkarounds of vehicles and stuff like that, talking to the YouTube to the TikTok audience. But what I hate about TikTok is whenever I want to post, I launch the TikTok app, somebody's yelling at me or dancing at me, and the music's super loud. Like, I just, like, as a creator, I want to go to the creator side. I want to see my stuff. I don't want to be like, hey, everybody, like, turn this thing off.
We're just old.
What's going on?
Just admit we're just too old for it.
We're too old.
Well, no, you're right. I think you're absolutely right. Like,
I know some people who are in their 30s and 40s and are killing it on TikTok.
Well, Omar is great.
Dude,
he just goes on there and blows the horn of a Lamborghini and gets like 5 million views.
But that's the thing. You have to know the audience.
You got to figure that out.
Yeah. And this actually goes back to print publications as well. Like when I was doing a general interest publication, no success. well, whatever. But then as soon as I went niche to the niche that was going to work, it was more successful. And so we're kind of getting to that point with all the different platforms where you have to double down on the niche aspects of each platform to hit that demographic appropriately. It can't just be, I like cars and I'm just going to do it my way. No, that's not going to work. We still see people on, do that on YouTube, and they're like, they do the same thing over and over again, and they're just not getting traction because they're not making themselves be seen. And being seen doesn't mean that you're loud and obnoxious. It means that you have an angle. What's your angle? And a lot of people haven't found that voice yet on the platform.
But that goes back to the content that we produce, right? So when I started doing video, obviously, like I specialized in kind of muscle cars and the storytelling arc of the muscle car.
Yeah, actually, Mike, can we get that little journey of how did you get from the TV show to doing web content?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, when Rob first contacted, we were on a board called Moparts, which is a Mopar board, a forum.
That's a great one.
Rob put this call out. He was like, listen, I'm looking to do the show and blah, blah, blah. And he contacted me. He's like, you have the charger. You should do this. And so we started talking and then did the television show. And it was the car that really got all the notoriety. It wasn't me. But it developed this following. And so then Rob said, do you want to write for some car domain stuff? And I said, sure. Then I remember the first time he's like, go to SEMA. And I was like, what's a SEMA?
Yeah,
because I had no idea. I was like, what's a SEMA? Amazing. And I stayed at the Sahara when the Sahara was up.
So crazy.
Oh, the Sahara. I always stayed at the Sahara.
And it was such a dump. It was so bad.
It was so easy to walk to and from.
Well, that's why we stayed there, right? You stayed at the Sahara. So, and I remember, I mean, this was back when I was a designer at an investment bank, and I was just, what you would say is raw. And at the time, like, again, the license plate on my car said Mr. Angry. And, it was just, it wasn't a persona per se. It was just, I just didn't care. And I remember that I went to SEMA and George Barris Rob, I don't know if you remember this. George Barris had designed this car, and it was a purple Lexus or something. It was the most god-awful thing you've ever seen. And I will stand by this. And I had a microphone, and I'm like, hey, this is Mike Musto of Car Domain. Do you see this behind me? It's the worst. Like everything about this car.
Offended by the fact that none of these cars could actually legitimately drive.
Oh, I was pissed
down the street, and
I was mad
of this.
Right, and I was like, it is the point. Rob's like, it's not the point. I was like, but there's so much stuff and nothing works, and this is bull crap. Like these are cars. And Rob's like,
you got over that after a while.
And something's never changed.
Yeah, I did get over it, but yeah, so started doing that, and then started writing, and then like anything else, when you write, if you have a decent voice or you have stories to tell, people will gravitate.
Remember that? Ride Lust?
Yeah, I was the editor-in-chief of a site called Ride Lust for a long time, and that was a decent site. By the time we left, it was a great site. And it got bought out by somebody. No, somebody bought it and got rid of it. But then the Drive channel came out, and at the time of the Drive channel, I was friends with Matt Farah and Mike Spinelli and all these guys that were like this New York-based automotive crew. Yeah. And we had a radio show on Sirius Satellite called RPM. It was me, Mike Spinelli, and Matt Farah. And we would have guests on every week. Like we interviewed the guys from Ice Road Truckers and like, a couple of other
was fun.
Like,
I did that with you guys once. That was like in a legit studio in Manhattan.
Oh no, it was right on 6th Avenue in Manhattan. And it was legit studio, and you walked in and they were like, oh, you're the guys from RPM. Like we thought we were somebody. We walk into the studio and we had our producer, and we'd sit down and she'd be like, all right. And we did the whole radio thing, and it was fun. And that's why like podcasting is fun. I enjoyed doing it. But yeah, and then from there, Drive came up and Big Muscle, my first show, hit, and that did fantastic. And then House of Muscle came up with Motor Trend, and then in the whole time was always a journalist. So started writing I've written for every book out there, right? I've written, I don't know how many cover stories for Hot Rod Magazine, did some stuff for Hemmings before I was actually with Hemmings, did stuff for Road and Track, Car and Driver, Motor Trend, all this stuff. And, you fight and you claw your way to wherever you want to be. Yeah. And now I look at automotive media, and it's like Ryan, you have carved out an outstanding niche for yourself doing SUVs and off-road. right? Like you are the go-to channel for
but without
SUVs
being
and
too off-road.
No, well, it's not too
no
off-road.
Jeep Wranglers
but
climbing up cliffs,
no. But it's consumer off-road.
It's like
which,
practical after.
Which I think
like,
is,
can my Volvo get over this thing?
Exactly. That's what people want to know.
Literally.
But it kind of is though, right? And you've gone so far as to buy a compound and outfit it with your own roads and your own obstacles that I think are relatable to 90% of the quote unquote off-road stuff that any amateur off-roader is going to do, right? But the reviews are good, they're clear, they're concise, totally informative. And so for anybody out there, Ryan's channel is Driving Sports TV. If you want to know about off-roads or SUVs, literally that's where you go. And it's not crazy super in depth, but it's super informative. And I think the best part about it is it's just plain honest.
We really get into like the all-wheel drive systems a lot. That is one thing where we do try to get in depth, and it's really difficult with the manufacturers. Sometimes they don't want to give you that info. They're like, no, it's not. But so, go ahead.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about manufacturers for a little bit, okay? Because manufacturers.
Now we're just going off on a tangent, but that's cool.
No, but the way they deal with media is interesting.
This is media, right? When you talk about automotive media and you talk about car reviews, there are manufacturers out there that are very picky about what they want you to say and what they want you to print. And I remember when I first started out, I got reamed by a couple of manufacturers because I was like, this thing is a shitbox. And, but then I went on to explain,
right? I mean, they'll just cut
straight
you
up.
You don't get
just cut you right out. You're never getting a car again. And it's like, listen, I gave an opinion on a product.
Yeah.
Like I remember the only manufacturer that I was ever banned, like straight up banned from was Smart. The Smart car when that came out.
You lasted longer than they did.
Dude, I did. So they gave me a Smart car, and I remember it was a Smart car. It was a diesel Brabus edition. So it was like a 30. It couldn't have been worse. It was just.
I would pay money to see you in one of those, though.
Dude, it was. So I wrote this review. And
didn't they have a 3-speed automatic transmission?
It was a 3-speed auto, and the transmission was garbage.
It was
and
awful.
I wrote at the time, I think they had sold 3,100 cars, and I the title of the article was Smart sells 3,100 cars because Americans finally realized they suck. Yeah. Right? And so the PR guy called me up and just, who do you think you are? Blah, 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 blah. I'm like, who do you think you are? Yeah. He's like, this car is not that bad. I was like, my man, have you driven it? I'm like, it's terrible. And he goes, well, maybe you just don't know how to drive it.
Oh,
and I was like,
fired.
Oh, we're going down that road now. And we went back and forth for like a good 6 minutes on the phone about, he was trying to defend what a pile of crap their car was. Mm-hmm. And I was going, how can you sell this to the consumer public without telling him what a pile of crap this car is? Mm-hmm. Right.
Well, it was a 10-year-old product by the time it showed up over here.
It was 10 years old, but it's garbage. It was just straight garbage.
There's very few cars that are absolute garbage these days.
Right.
It's a very, very, very short list. And typically the manufacturers know it and they don't really push those products.
Right.
So, like, I want to get this from the test fleet. Oh, it doesn't exist. Yeah. Oh, okay.
But Ryan, have you, and Rob, you too, because we've all done reviews and we still do.
Yeah.
You have to learn how to navigate. You have to learn how to say something is garbage without saying it's garbage. Like I've always found, if you throw in one garbage feature and then back it up with 3 great, not so garbage features.
Well, and the truth is that there's a car for everybody. There's always, I hate the Mitsubishi Mirage.
Everybody hates that car. That's garbage.
No, you are wrong. There are fan clubs for that car. There are some people who genuinely love that car, and they love it for all the reasons that are opposite of why we hate it. They don't care about what we care about. And so for those guys, I actually had a Mirage and I chose not to review it. And for me, it was a matter of, I didn't want to waste my time with something that wasn't good. And
what's the little tiny Mitsubishi that they had in the press fleets a couple years ago?
That was the Mirage. There was a bright purple one.
There's the purple. I have a great story about that car. So they dropped the purple. We probably all had the same one. They dropped the purple car off at my place, and I was like, "Are you serious? Like, really? I'm not. I don't." And he's like, yeah, the last journalist who had it, his wife bought him a clown nose for driving it around. And then I had it for a week. I'm driving it around. Like 3 different people I know saw me driving it because everyone would notice that thing.
Yeah,
it was purple. It was
a bright pinkish purple too. It wasn't just normal
you were
purple.
like one of the California raisins driving that thing.
It was amazing.
Yeah, it was I was driving with my wife on that, just up a slight grade. Like, we're not even talking a hill. We're just driving on the road. And she turned to me and she said, "Is this thing going to make it?" And it's just like, my wife is not a car person. And she knew that thing was struggling with just 2 adults. Yeah. And my wife is tiny. So just like,
Can we talk about the Nissan Versa?
That's only slightly better than the Mitsubishi Mirage.
My wife's a nurse, and when I had that, she called it the MRSA, and now that's stuck in my head. It's terrible.
All right, so let's talk about this. Right, we talked about print. We've gotten a video, right? We've talked about like the short form TikTok stuff. What do we think is next? Like, where do you guys think automotive media is going to go next? Because listen, for some, like for us here at Hemmings, like our 3 books are fantastic, and we still have like 450,000 square. Like, we still kill it in print.
Yeah,
we're old school, but like we have a dedicated following, which is great, and it's nice to pick up for me personally, it's not. I still buy magazines, so like I like picking up a magazine, scrolling through the pages, so I get that. But where do we think it's going? What do you guys think the next form of automotive media is?
Well, they're all just telling stories. You know, you're telling stories about the car, and you're giving details about it. And so I think there's always going to be, you know, a place for the storytelling medium aspects of it. Like when we do reviews, we try to do little mini adventures within our reviews, climbing up, you know, doing an overland trail or going through this desert or that desert. And we do kind of a mix mosh of both those as well as more straightforward reviews, depending on, you know, which vehicle we have. And I just don't think that like, you know, the whole metaverse thing and whatnot really lends to storytelling that's more freeform. And I know a lot of brands are like, if you were to say to every car maker, I have a new channel, it's focusing on the metaverse, I'm going to bring you to all the people in the metaverse, without even knowing what that means, they'll be like, what car do you want? We will put you in it for a week. Right. You know, and you know, like, I
think my thought on that is that I think the car thing's going to split in 2. You're going to have the cars that are like your iPhone, that are just appliances,
like the new Sony car, for example.
And then there's going to be lifestyle vehicles. So you're like a 4Runner guy, you know, that whole lifestyle. Like where I live in Washington, like half the cars are these decked out 4Runners, you know, and like
that never go
there's going to be just these niche scenes. So I think it's just going to get kind of nichier, and then the other side, half of it will be just tech stuff that's like an iPhone.
I think we should do a show. I think we should find one person who represents whatever the automotive group is. Like Ryan, I want to meet the head Mirage guy or girl or woman or you know, I want to meet the head Mirage person, and I want to have a serious conversation with them about why.
Yeah.
Why do you think the Mirage is? Why do you like? Because listen, I like some funky stuff. Right. There are cars that I like, and I'm like, it's amazing. I love it. Where other people look at me, and like it was yesterday, like I forwarded Rob a picture of a 69 Ford LTD. He's like, what's wrong with you? Yeah. And I'm like, but I like that. He's like, I don't understand.
But I think it's whatever you started out with is like, no matter how awful it was, you're going to have a fun.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I started out with a 1981 Mercury Capri 4-cylinder with 4 different tires, and 2 of the 4 headlights worked. There you go. Right? I don't have any fondness for that car.
Oh, really?
No, I wiped it out. I totaled it, you know? And it was like, but and so people are like, did you ever have a Fox body? I'm like, yeah, it was pretty terrible. Like good. Right? Fox bodies. You know, like I had a Toyota Tercel. I have no fondness for that car.
From a content producer's perspective, you know, even if cars are going more towards the whole refrigerator aspects, you know, Sony just launched a car, Lucid has a car, everybody in their, it's kind of like the early days of cars where everybody and their cousin is launching something new. Yeah. Some of them will go into production. Some of them will make 2 or 3. I mean, I don't know if most people realize it's actually pretty easy to make a prototype car, because you can call up a company, tell them what you want in it, and they will build you a car. Not that hard. Production is 99.9% of the thing. And some people just can't get that. Have Bollinger.
Right.
The chances of them going to production, pretty much nil. But the point being is that it doesn't matter if you have a refrigerator or you have a lifestyle type vehicle. There's certain types of things you can do with all of them. And that, I think, bodes well for what we do. You know, whether you're writing a story, shooting a video, or even just doing like an episodic TikTok where you're like, we're getting ice cream in our little Mitsubishi Mirage, you know, that kind of thing. Yeah. There's always something that you can do to move it forward. And as media changes, I mean, we change with it, obviously. I mean, what we're doing today, just this podcast, 20 years ago, you'd be like, well, we need a studio and a producer and I have a studio. Anyway, normally, you know, you just don't need a lot of stuff to do. You can kind of on a whim just go like, oh, well, I want to do this now. And that's, I think, probably the great thing about where we're at right now. And our industry is that because even if as it's niching down, even as the channels are proliferating and there's so many of them, it really gives you a lot of opportunity to explore. I know some guys who have huge YouTube channels and they're starting TikToks that have nothing to do with their YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Like nothing.
You have to. If you want
yeah.
to.
And not
what
even
about, what about the intersection? You're bringing up the meta thing. What about the intersection with video games?
Oh,
massive.
Yeah.
Because it seems like there's going to be like some melding there between like, that is the meta for a car, right?
Well, I mean, if you think about it,
a virtual, you can drive any track now in any car virtually.
Yeah, actually, it was kind of funny. I was watching my son on Minecraft yesterday, and he swam down into the ocean, and at the bottom of the ocean was a 4-seater Jeep, and I'm like, wait, what? And he's like, oh yeah, blah blah blah. I don't even know how it got there.
That's how people are going to experience cars now. A lot of people, like you could do a drift event, right?
Yeah.
Well, think about it like this, right? People don't even buy cars at dealers anymore. Right? You're going to a Carvana or your CarMax or whatever the case is, and you're having them shipped to you. That's not the way I do it. I want to see it and feel it. But regardless, we're pulling the interaction out. Now, video games, when you talk about things like Gran Turismo, right? You talk about Forza Motorsports, you talk about any of these things, and you talk about how customizable they are. Go ahead, Ryan.
In 1998, I had what was it, Gran Turismo on the PlayStation 1.
Yeah,
and I wanted to buy, I had a good year and I was going to go buy myself a car. So I went in Gran Turismo and I built up a Miata, a Subaru 2.5 RS, a Acura Integra GSR, and I drove all three of them. I test drove them in the video game, as well as some others, but those were the three that I'm like, I like these the best. So then I went to the actual dealerships and drove all three of them. Yeah, they didn't really drive much like the video game at all, but they sounded very similar. Yeah. And I ended up actually buying an Integra GSR, and I think it's because of the PlayStation.
Dude, it's not. I mean. Video game. If you grew up, I mean, we're getting onto a segue here. Video games, but it is automotive. It is media, so it's fine.
It's gonna merge all together.
I think it already has. Yeah. I mean, I know back then. I mean, this is we're gonna date ourselves, but there was a game and it was made by Atari, and it was an actual video game that you go to an arcade to play. That
Pole Position?
No, it wasn't Pole Position. It was called Hard Driving.
Oh, that was a good one. Pole Position might be before.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, Pole Position was before. Hard Driving was later.
Right. Yeah. Hard Driving was the first game that I ever played. And you sat down and you sat in a driver's seat and you had an actual manual gated shifter and the steering wheel was force feedback. Okay. So like you would go around a corner and all of a sudden, if they felt this car slide, the wheel would start to tug at you.
Yeah. It wasn't like reality at all, but it was pretty incredible for the time.
It was something, right?
Yeah,
for the
it
time.
Was something.
And and like it was one of those things where it was the first one I would call from a child's point of view, a simulator. Right. Yeah. Because it forced you to make corrections and things like that.
Right.
But now we talk about things like Gran Turismo and everything else and Forza, where you can literally now go in and design your own car. Like in Forza, I don't know how many times I've like built my Daytona to a T. Yeah. And the cool part is other people have built it.
Yeah.
Right. So you can design whatever your mind can think of and then bring it to the real world. Like if you could build it in a game, you could build it in reality. Right.
Yeah.
And that's immersive. I mean,
but then that's totally getting immersive. Down to like platforms, like even YouTube didn't really become everywhere and everything until there were platforms that made it easily accessible. Because in the early days, you had to have a Flash plugin. The first version of YouTube required a Flash plugin, which like a lot of people didn't want to mess with that and whatnot. And so that's now getting down to like platforms. And I don't think we're going to see any like universal language in terms of like media conveyance, like, oh, everybody tested this on that. Honestly, consoles are about as close as it gets. But even they're fractured. Like, we're on Apple TV. We play video games at home on an Apple TV, yet another platform. So, we're really going to have to come up with almost one has to win by a big margin.
Right. You think so? I mean, I guess you're saying
code bases have to be easily portable.
Really important, but like in the cycling world, there's a new reality training thing called Zwift, and you can go for a bike ride with other people in a virtual landscape.
That's cool, but that's always going to make it niche. When you need special equipment or it's a unique platform, it's gonna stay niche, and those type of things have always existed.
Yeah,
I mean,
but they're getting better, I guess, and I think you're going to have the chance to hang out with other people more and hang out with your people you look up to. You could go on a drive with Mike Musto virtually. See,
that type of stuff would be pretty cool.
Yeah. I think that's I think that's where automotive journalism is going to head, because then the influencers you can actually interact with them in this virtual world.
Sure.
And that's where manufacturers are going to want to be too.
Yeah, I've done some stuff where I've rigged up a car with like live cameras while driving and like answered questions. The problem is, of course, you can't drive and read the questions at the same time.
Yeah,
but we'll get there.
Dangerous. I mean, if you're Elon Musk, you'd have people believe that you can.
Well, of course.
Of course you can. All right, so we have covered a ton of ground. We've gone off a couple of tangents here, but I think we've gone through the realm of automotive media, from print to video to interactive games to just about everything you think of, and a little bit of what we think is going to come in the future. So, and any final thoughts before we wrap this up on where stuff is going to go, or more importantly, what you would like to see in the future?
We have to be careful of dead ends, because there's always things like 360 video that are always popping up, and you put a lot of resources in that from a content producer, and you're like, people don't actually want that. People want to be told what to look at. And I don't mean told in like, you will watch this, but like with 360, you can look anywhere. But when you're telling a story about a car, you only need to look at the car, So I think there's going to be so many shiny objects to pursue over the next few years. I think that like where we're at right now this is going to be it for the next 5 years, probably, before the next shiny object shows up. But I'm really kind of excited for what, I love buying toys. As you guys know, new camera comes out, I'm there. And I look forward to all the stuff that we get to play with. I'm not so psyched on whole metaverse things, because I was in college when we had our first round of virtual reality, and it was going to be the next big thing back in the early 90s, and it wasn't, because it sucked. And even today's virtual reality, I'm like, it's still not there yet. I think we have another 10 years. So, but really excited for what's coming up, and I'm hoping I can rise to meet the challenge.
I would also say, and Hemmings is proof of this, actually print's not dead. And people are, some magazines are getting better. And they're, it's a collectible thing. It's fun to get something tangible. So you're going to keep seeing new magazines coming out, and the ones that exist getting better. It's going to stay competitive, and I think there's going to stay a market for it.
Great. So old, so
it's
new.
It's kind of like the records came back, right? Vinyl came back, like magazines, the good ones will survive.
Yep,
that's right.
Yep. It's amazing what you can get pressed on vinyl these days. Like almost everything, you can get a version of on vinyl.
You can get this podcast on vinyl.
Yes.
Well, based on that, and Rob's lying, by the way, we're going to close out this episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod Barbecue podcast. And folks, as always, make sure if you're watching on YouTube, you hit that subscribe button for us. Also, make sure to check out our magazines. We have, a classified section with just thousands upon thousands of amazing vehicles, as far as our, as well as our auction at Hemmings.com. So check that out. Also, if you have any suggestions about what you'd like to hear, what topics you want us to cover, drop us a line in the comments on the YouTube channel, or just shoot us an email and we will respond. And if we don't respond, we'll think about it. But the fact is, let us know. We'll take that to heart, and we'll probably make a show on it. So thanks very much, everybody. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.